All right. Well, good morning, everybody. And my talk today is going to be on one particular town in Victoria and its tourist wear. And that town is Ballarat, which is one of our oldest towns in Victoria. I'd just like to, first of all, do some acknowledgements for people who've provided me with photos, access to the pattern books, and information about Ballarat as well, and the company that purchased the tourist wear for Ballarat, which was Tunbridge and Sons. So Ballarat is a regional city in Victoria, currently has a population of just over 200,000, but in 1851, gold was found in Ballarat, and within 10 years, the population in Ballarat had swelled to over 540,000. And as a result of that, Ballarat has been lucky enough to benefit from the gold rush in the 1800s. As a result of that wealth being in the town, they've got some amazing 19th century buildings that have been really well preserved, including the town hall. And obviously, once money and power come into play, that means that people have purchasing power, they have the ability to travel further, and Ballarat was seen as a holiday destination by the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries. And one of the companies that recognised the opportunity in having visitors to the town was a company called Tunbridge and Sons. Initially, they were a furniture manufacturer and located in a part of Ballarat called Bakery Hill. But in 1881, they created and set up a purpose-built furniture arcade in Lydiard Street South in the heart of Ballarat. And it is still one of the preeminent streets in Ballarat and has a lot of the original 19th century buildings. And this is a picture of the Tunbridge Arcade taken early 1950s. So it had been a bit more modernised, but it on the ground floor there's more modernisation, but overall it hadn't changed throughout the time it had been built, which was around 1881. So as part of marketing, following the First World War, there doesn't appear to have been any kind of request for tourist wear prior to the First World War. But after the First World War, Tunbridge's contacted the Shelley Company to request tourist wear pieces to highlight some of the features of Ballarat. And apologise, some of the images are a bit difficult, but there were three images that Tunbridge's submitted for features of Ballarat. And one was the Royal Botanic Garden or the Botanic Gardens statuary, which was built in the 1800s, and the Victory Arch commemorating those that fought and died in World War One, and a street scene of Ballarat, the main street, Sturt Street in Ballarat, with its trams, its electrified trams. So following that, I'm just going to go through and talk about each one of those features and where it's come from and why. So the Botanic Gardens were established in 1858 in Ballarat and is one of the oldest botanical gardens. The original plantings came from Baron von Mueller, who was the man behind the development of the Melbourne Royal Botanic Gardens, which had only opened a few years prior. And one of the earliest features in the gardens was the building of a statuary pavilion, which was built in 1887 to house the statue, the Flight from Pompeii, and four other statues which had been donated by a local businessman to the gardens. And rather than have them out in the open, they actually built quite an elaborate statuary, which is glass and brick building, and it's still there today. The main statue was the Flight from Pompeii, and that's the one that they chose to have featured on tourist wear. And you can see the photograph, you can see in the background the glass paneling that is there, and they featured it on both earthenware in vases and on china as well. So there were a number of different pieces that had the scene on it. So that piece seems to have been popular, but not overly so. So the next one that they commissioned was the scene of Ballarat, of the main street, featuring the trams. The trams were first used in Ballarat in 1887, with the trams originally being horse-drawn, but were electrified in 1905. The trams covered 7 routes and over 24 kilometres of track around Ballarat, servicing the transport needs of locals and tourists alike. And the trams continued to be used until 1971. And this is a postcard in 1905 showing the scene in Ballarat, and all of those buildings are still in place. And you can see the trams running either side of the main thoroughfare of Sturt Street. And this is photos of the cups that I've got featuring the very similar scene. A little bit further down, so the first one shows the fountain, which is at the corner of Sturt and Lydiard, and this one's a little bit further down the street, so you can just see in the background the town hall just there. And interestingly, there's 2 different styles of colour for the trams, the sort of muted brown colour on some pieces, and then on other pieces, it's a brighter red and it's raised. Obviously, they've put an additional top over the original tram, which has sort of highlighted more of its shape, I think. It seems to be the only one that they've done with any kind of raised image on it. And they've produced that in a number of different things, including pin dishes, again with the raised image. Yeah, you can see the difference in the images, and also on earthenware. Again, the raised picture. And then came the Ballarat Arch of Victory. The arch was completed in 1920, which is why I know that they can't have ordered those images prior to 1920, because the arch didn't exist. The arch was actually built to commemorate the loss of soldiers and service personnel in the First World War, and was funded entirely by the community and led by a group of women called the Lucas Girls, who were employed at the Lucas Textile Factory. And they were the prime fundraisers for the building of the arch. And the other company that supported and donated their wares was Selkirk Bricks, which is still in production today. And they donated all of the bricks to build the arch. It's the largest commemorative arch in Australia, being 16.5 metres by 19.5 metres wide, and with an opening of 7.5 metres high and 9.5 metres wide. So it's quite a large arch, and it also forms the entrance to the largest avenue of honour in the world. And that was also planted by volunteers, most of whom were the Lucas Girls, and has been added to after every loss of a local service person in a theatre of war, even up to today. So it continues to grow. This is a very blurry picture of the opening of the arch, which was actually opened by His Royal Highness Prince Edward of Wales on the 2nd of June 1920. So it was a huge, huge event for Ballarat, as you can see. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people there, both celebrating the fact that they'd been able to build it, and also that it was operating. It's appeared on a wide variety of pieces from Shelley, and it seems to have been the most popular of the 3 images. There's, as you can see, jugs, salt and pepper, there's butter dishes, cups, plates, teaware, as well as earthenware vases. So it's on those as well. So Tunbridge and Sons ceased trading in 1963, but, and this is speculation because we don't have a clear idea whether it is right or not, it would appear they arranged for a further image to be put on to souvenir wear, and that image is of the Eureka Stockade Memorial. And the Eureka Stockade is one of the seminal points in Australian political and social history, as many believe it was the birth of democracy in Australia, and that belief is still very firmly held. Gold was discovered in Ballarat in 1851, as I said, and saw a huge influx of people into the goldfields. These people required infrastructure, but the colonial government was bankrupt, basically. They had no money. In order to raise funds, the government decided to impose a licensing fee of 30 shillings per month on all miners, which was a huge sum of money at the time. And initially, if miners were doing well, then the payment for the gold would have helped to cover the cost of the licensing fee. But if they weren't doing so well, then it was very difficult for them to find that amount of money. And as a result of that, in 1854, the miners started to meet and protest at the imposition of the licensing fee and the fact that it was extremely onerous and the means with which they were trying to extract the licensing fee from miners was becoming increasingly violent. The police and colonial militia were becoming increasingly violent towards the miners. And then in 1954, at the end of 1954 in November, miners raised the Southern Cross flag, the Eureka flag, and built a stockade. Oh, sorry, 1854. Sorry, I'm 100 years out. And built a stockade at Bakery Hill to try to prevent access by troops to the minefields, thus stopping them from going in and collecting the licence fee. And then in the dead of night on the 3rd of December 1854, the militia stormed the barricades whilst most of the miners were asleep and only a very small percentage of them were there. Prior to that, there'd been hundreds located at the barricade. And 22 miners and 5 militia were killed. And although the monument to the miners was erected in 1884, there's no evidence that it was considered by Tunbridges as a suitable subject for their souvenir wear when they initially ordered the souvenir wear. There's nothing in the pattern books to show any images of the memorial, but we've got an example of the memorial on a Shelley pin dish with the back stamp from 1945 to 1966. Clearly, it had to be done before 1963 because that's when Tunbridges ceased operating. But there's no indication on the back of it that it was done specifically for Tunbridges. All of the other pieces that have come from Shelley for Tunbridges have their information on the base of each of the items, along with the Shelley back stamps. But the memorial pin dish, which is this one, and beside it a photo of the actual memorial, doesn't have anything other than the Shelley back stamp on the back, and it's the 1945 to 1966 back stamp. So we don't have a lot of information. We don't even know if there are other pieces that might be out there that people have. And I'd love to hear from anybody and maybe today see something that people have, and that's a blurry close-up of the stockade on the pin dish. And that is a photo of the Eureka flag flying at the Eureka Memorial Park, which it flies every day and is obviously a copy, but the original flag is preserved in the museum at the Memorial Park in Ballarat and is considered to be a very special memento of the time. The actual uprising led to the first Legislative Council being appointed in Victoria, and out of that, a number of the miners who had taken part in the Eureka Stockade were actually elected to Parliament. The main one being Peter Lalor, who was seen as the lead perpetrator of the uprising, but he was actually elected to Parliament and spent some 20 odd years in Parliament post the Eureka Stockade. So it was a very seminal moment for Victoria and for Australia in terms of democracy. So, thank you very much. I hope that it has been of interest, and I am happy to take questions.